Is it possible to put together an ultra budget token deck that combos off without utilizing any rares or mythics? Because that is what we're going to find out today. Hello my fiery friends, the Infernoman here with the hottest in budget deck technology. And for today's deck tech, join me once again as we play through our Basically series. For those who haven't seen this series at all, this is again where we put together some of the best deck techs that you can enjoy on an ultra budget that will not require you to spend a single rare or mythic to build.
Say what?
That's right. So without further ado, we will be playing with the final in the 3-color series of our basic decks. A deck that I am calling today, Basically Treasures. But before we continue, if you do like any of the content that I do, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch the content. You can support me monthly for a small amount on Patreon, where I have all of my extended bonus footage posted. We also have a Redbubble spot where you can buy merch like stickers and shirts, or for free, all you can just do also is just join our growing community on Discord. Your support helps keep this channel going. All links are in the details below. Longtime viewers of the channel know how we do it. We have to talk about the stats of the deck before we dive right in. So our Basically Treasures deck is a nice set of colors, which means it's going to be white, red, and green. You're looking at an advantage curve of about 2.0, and we're going to be rocking 12 creatures, 4 instants, 4 sorceries, 20 artifacts, and 20 lands. Basically Treasures, in short, is going to be a pseudo combo deck where it's going to be a pretty spicy one at that. We're going to try to build up as many tokens, primarily treasures, as much as possible to then cash them in and then utilize one of our key cards to burn out our opponent. If that doesn't work for whatever reason, we do have a plan B to the deck where we can either beat down our opponent or even pump up one of our major creatures to then smash our way to victory.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off.
So without further ado, let's just go ahead and show you how this deck works. So to begin, we're going to be utilizing in the 1-drop slot Novice Inspector and Thraben Inspector. Both cards do the exact same thing. They simply enter, they will make a clue token which we can utilize either on to cash in to help us draw a card, or we can just utilize it to bring in our artifact count for when we need it for another card. And the only other creature we have is going to be Reckless Fireweaver. I absolutely do love what this card does. All it simply does is it'll just ping our opponent for 1 point of damage anytime an artifact enters on our side of the field. So as you can see, of course, we have a ton of artifacts what we make with either tokens or just casting stuff, and it'll just slowly but surely will ping our opponent down, hopefully at least to close the gap before we can finish off our opponent with our next part of the game plan. As far as the non-creature spells, circle back over to the 1-drop slot. We'll have Duskrose Reliquary here, and we have Portable Hole. Portable Hole will allow us to exile a non-land permanent an opponent controls with a mana value of 2 or less until the hole leaves the battlefield. Duskrose Reliquary actually can exile anything regardless of its mana value if it's an artifact or a creature. However, the only caveat is you do need to sacrifice an artifact or creature in order to get the full value out of it. So thankfully we do have a lot of cheap stuff that we can sacrifice to get that value. As far as the 2-drop slot here, we have Dowsing Device here, so we need to talk about this card for a second. It's actually a highly underrated card. I actually love what it does. So real quick, Dowsing Device here is a 2-mana red artifact that reads, when it enters or another artifact you control enters, up to 1 target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. Then you can then transform the Dowsing Device if you control 4 or more artifacts. Once you do transform it, however, it becomes Geode Grotto, a land that's a cave, and you can tap it to add red. Or you can pay 3 and tap it, and then until end of turn, target creature gains haste and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of artifacts you control. You can only activate this, however, at sorcery speed. Woo! That's actually pretty impressive for an uncommon here. So to put it another way, once we start building up a ton of extra artifacts, the card will flip into an extra land, which we can then utilize as kind of like a backup plan to pump up any one of our cheaper creatures here to do a bunch of extra damage and smash our way to victory. However, the real plan, of course, is going to be the one and only Dragon Spark Reactor. Again, we do need to talk about this card because this is also one of the stars of our show. So, Dragon Spark Reactor is a 2-mana artifact that's red, and it reads, whenever the reactor or another artifact you control enters, you get to put a charge counter on the reactor. And then afterwards, you can pay for and sacrifice the reactor. Then it'll deal that much damage equal to the number of charge counters to target player, and that much damage to 1 target creature. We honestly don't really care too much about the targeting of a creature. However, there are some cases where you may need to do that. The real reason, of course, is, as you kind of figured out now, with the game template we have, we need to just dump a bunch of extra artifacts out once we have a reactor on board, pump it up with a bunch of charge counters, and hopefully we'll have enough to then sacrifice it in the late game to then take out our opponent with 1 shot. However, we do need, of course, to find additional ways to keep building up more of our artifact count. So the next card here is going to help us with that. Collector's Vault. Collector's Vault is just a 2-mana artifact here where we simply just tap it, pay 2, then just loot, i.e. draw a card, discard a card. We also get to create a treasure treasure token out of the deal. And as far as the 3-drop slot here, we have Flick a Coin and Seize the Spoils. These are going to be our card draw spells to help us just dig through our deck to get extra cards out. We can then, of course, utilize them to get more treasures, which of course will then synergize with everything else we've been trying to do. Seize the Spoils, however, does require us to loot, so we do have to discard a card to then draw 2 cards and create a treasure. Flick a Coin will do 1 point of damage and then just help us draw a single card and also create a treasure for us. The final other backup plan to the whole deck is going to be Capenna Express. So talking about this card for just a moment here, Capenna Express is a 4 mana vehicle. It's a 6/6 and you have to crew it for 3. However, if you want to cheat it out, however, you can also sacrifice a treasure and then the Capenna Express becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So this is the only other option we have as we keep building up extra treasures. If we want to cash in 1 or 2, we can then turn this on for practically nothing and then do some major damage to our opponent. And again, that's kind of, I kind of lost track at this point. Wait, what is this now? Plan A, B, C? Huh? The point, of course, I'm trying to make is it's just another extra layer to the whole game plan. As far as your land base is concerned, of course, this is a budget deck, so we're going to stick to as simple as can be. We have 7 plains, 7 mountains, a single forest, cabaret courtyards, which can sack instantly to help us dig out the rest of our basic lands, and a single copy of Volatile Fault, which gives us a little bit of extra pseudo synergy because it can take out a non-basic land an opponent controls, and it also does leave a treasure behind, which we definitely want to start building up with this deck. If you're interested, of course, in taking this into best of 3, here's my recommendation for the sideboard. So if we want to protect our game plan, we'll have copies of Tamiyo Safekeeping here to protect any one of our permanents, giving it hexproof and indestructible, and also gaining us 2 life to stabilize. If we need to blow up the whole board, with the very minimum, we can then get away with Pyroclasm. It'll deal 2 damage to each creature. This will, of course, affect our creatures, but we usually don't care about that, at least with how this deck works. We do have a little bit of extra backup here with Haywire Might for artifact and enchantment hate. It'll only, however, exile non-creature artifacts or enchantments, but it still is great to have regardless. We'll have copies of Soul Guide Lantern here. It is also an artifact, so it does help us out synergizing with the rest of the deck, and it is going to be our graveyard hate of choice. Spring-loaded Sawblades here is a little bit of an interesting card choice here, but hear me out for a second here. It does have Flash, it's only 2 mana, and it'll deal 5 damage to a tapped creature an opponent controls. If we manage to flip it, however, we can then make it a big 5/5 creature here. We can just do some extra damage as another big artifact creature just to coincide with Capenna Express. And then finally, if we do need to protect ourselves against some non-combat damage, we will have copies of the Wanderer here. Also, this can create for us another extra layer of exiling creatures with a power 4 or greater off of the battlefield. Now with that, let's go over the tips and tricks that I can give you to get the most out of the deck. So obviously in the early game, you want to make sure with that opening hand, have your Reckless Fireweaver ready to go or your Dragon Spark Reactor. One of these cards, of course, is your key to victory. So as long as you have one of those, you should be good to go. Otherwise, start putting out there those inspectors to make sure you can start building up some of those clue tokens that you're going to need in case you do need to draw into other action. Once you, of course, have either the Fireweaver down or the Reactor, let them do their thing as they start either accumulating damage or building up charge counters. To be perfectly honest, of course, we're going to expect that the Fireweaver is going to get blown up by your opponent because once they see that you're going to start pinging down with your tokens, they're most likely going to try to just spot removal it right there. However, with Dragon Spark Reactor, unless if your opponent has Artifact Hate built into their main deck, you mostly can get away with that on the field for a little while, as most opponents will think it's pretty much harmless until they think they can blow it up later in the game. As the game progresses, however, make sure to keep building up as many of those tokens. Ideally, you want to try to get down later on your Collector's Vault or your Dowsing Device to start again pumping up either one of your creatures or start digging through your deck to build up treasures. If you can pull out your Capenna Express in the mid game, that's also great once you have a couple of treasures to pop, so this way you can then put more pressure on your opponent as you keep doing more and more damage. And no, of course, don't be afraid to spend those treasure tokens or those clue tokens to then keep digging through your deck. One of the biggest advantages this deck has is there's plenty of ways to keep pushing through and then draw and discard what you don't need to get to, of course, your game plan. Your deck is going to be a little on the slow side to start building up and comboing off, because if your opponent can take off the field those reactors and the Reckless Fireweaver, you're then going to have to rely on a bit more of a shaky game plan of using Capenna Express, which can't protect itself in the main deck. Honestly, the learning curve for this deck is going to be a bit more challenging versus some of the other budget decks that we've done, mostly just because you will need to figure out the balance between when to pop some of your tokens to either draw cards or then turn on other cards such as Capenna Express, or to cash them in to then cast other cards. On the other hand, don't be afraid again to utilize them when you need to, for example for your Duskrose Reliquary to then exile certain things that you need to get out of the way, or to, again, to activate Capenna Express so you can keep putting more damage and pressure on your opponent's game plan. Of course, I don't need to remind you that this is definitely one of the spiciest budget builds you can put together, because while the combo does look very shaky and easy to break, if you manage to pull off, oh man, it is so satisfying if you can just pull off at least one of these combos. So hang in there, don't be afraid to take a couple losses, but when you manage to pull off that win, you're gonna love how this deck pulls that off. Now, if you do like this style of deck and you want to take it to the next level, maybe invest a couple of extra rares or mythics into it. As always, just like the previous deck techs we've done in this series, you'll see, of course, on screen right now, a couple of screenshots of previous deck techs that are similar to this style of gameplay. The links for those deck techs that you see on screen right now will be scattered throughout this video if you haven't already done so, so be sure to click on those and you can see where else you can take this deck if you are interested in this style of gameplay. And with that, we have finally now completed all of the ultra budget 3-color combos out there. So let me know in the comments below if you're looking forward to the next step in the series, which is going to be ultra budget 4-color decks. Overall, this is going to be, of course, one of the spiciest and jankiest combos you could put together on an ultra budget, not utilizing any rares or mythics. And of course, we're going to have to expect that combo decks like this are going to take a little bit of time before you can actually pull off some victories. However, if you manage to do so, you're definitely going to enjoy it when you manage to get those sweet, sweet victories. So to put it another way, if you're a fan of token decks, if you're a fan of combo decks, and if you're a fan of a kind of a deck that can be super versatile with how it gets to its victory, whether you want to go big, go wide, or just burn out your opponent, then I would definitely say, give this deck a try. And I assure you, when you manage to pull off that victory, but you're definitely going to have a lot of fun doing so, and you'll be very surprised at how you can pull it off on a budget, and you will definitely not be disappointed. That's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching, everyone. And just remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later.